Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You are tuned in to how to make awesome portraits like the one that you saw to start this whole thing out. Hosted by Sony, featuring the wonderful Chris Orwig. What's the story behind that picture, Chris?
Let's see, wait, which picture was it too? Because I was prepping my files, so I
That
didn't
was the
even.
I like you very much sign. Little graffiti under
Oh,
there, the hat.
yes, yes. Okay, that's great. I love that. So there is a good story behind that, which is I'm mentoring this guy. As you know, I do a lot of this mentoring and coaching and stuff, and it's really fun to like kind of share the passion for the craft with someone, especially when you're out in the world. And so we're driving to this location to photograph his friend who um, really wrestled with being an alcoholic. Eventually, his wife kind of required that he would check himself into this place called the Dream Center, which is kind of like rehab for homeless people, really. And she was just, and he had tried all the fancy ones, didn't work. And she was like, either you're doing this or I'm out of here. So he did it. He got sober. It's been years since then. So he went back to the bunk where he lived for 100 days, photographed him there. Really cool
Wow.
project, right? To kind of like, and this guy had been a really good friend of my friend and kind of helping tell the story of that. So that's where we're headed. And the reason why I'm kind of needed to say that is we're headed somewhere cool, meaningful, important, right? And as photographers, we're often like, this is where we're going. And with the guy I'm mentoring, I often talk about this idea that what you many times need to do is turn your back on the sunset. And what I mean by that, it's become kind of a catchphrase for us, which is everyone's at the beach watching the sunset and everyone's photographing the sunset. But if you turn your back to it, you suddenly are seeing what the sunset's lighting up. And sometimes that's more interesting than the sunset, right? Like even like let's say let's say you're on a photography workshop, everyone's photographing the sunset. Well, it's actually the photographers lit by the sunset light that would make a cool image. But the sunset we've seen too many times. Does that make sense? So kind of like not what's that?
1000%. This is why we click. I have a thing for taking photos of at landmarks, not of
Okay.
the landmark, but I'll walk up towards the landmark and turn around and take a picture of everyone taking a picture of the landmark
Yes.
because
Yeah.
everyone sees
Yeah.
this view, but no one ever sees kindred
Right.
spirits, man.
Kindred spirits. And it's like a photographic principle. I mean, it's not always a 180. Sometimes it's like a 45-degree turn, but it's like just cultivating awareness. So even if you're so focused and you have your vision, not passing up something, that strikes your eye. So we're driving by and my friend was like, that sign was like the coolest thing. And I was like, it kind of sounds like you want to photograph it. Should we U-turn it? And he's like, let's U-turn it. So we U-turn it, text the person, we're going to be 5 minutes late. And then he takes a picture of the sign and I'm kind of like, tell me about it. And he's like, yeah, kind of telling me what he's seeing. I'm like, I think it would be a lot better with a person in it, and because that's going to tell a different story. And I'm like, let me just climb up on this, like hop on this trash can, climb up on this old wall and sit up there. And then he's just like, like suddenly, rather than some random sign, it's a photograph of mentor friend. And for me, it's great too. I liked, but it could have, if we had someone else in the car, I would have had them go up there. Doesn't matter who's there. Um, so I like the photograph a lot, I think, because it's like this reminder to like not be so focused that you overlook something you're passing by. And then if you pass by something, to work it. Like we did some photos and then we added in the human element. I also did a photo of him in the same spot, and then we drove on our way and did the quote real photograph. And I just find photography's like that. It's often like, and maybe with the guy too. I know it's leading to a lot of storytelling, but we photographed the guy at his bunk, which was really cool. And then I was like to the guy I'm mentoring, I'm like, man, what'd be really cool is to like do a rooftop photo. And he's like, what are you talking about? Because we're in this tall building at like downtown LA. It's misty and rainy, and I'm just thinking, dude, this is an opportunity, And so I'm like, let me just go scout out something. He's kind of like you're crazy, whatever. I find the roof access and it's freaking amazing, right? And so we get, and the guy we're photographing is this artist and this painter, and we do this photo, which has become this guy I'm mentoring, his all-time favorite photograph he's ever caught. And it's basically him on this rooftop. You can see a little bit of LA in the background. It's misty, moody. We had a B10 out there, and it's just everything like worked. And he has since printed it 6 feet by 4 feet tall, right? On metal, and it's like freaking amazing photograph, right? The one in the bunk is cool because of the meaning, but not necessarily like photographically cool. Where the rooftop one is cool because of the meaning and it's photographically cool. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So, and obviously we're talking about finding the keepers and what makes a keeper. So this is actually really good content. Of course, you ask good questions. Um, but again, that's that whole point of we were there on task. The bunk shot was the goal. We got something before and then we got something after. And the third one was the best, but we covered it, right? And so, when you're teaching someone and you can kind of talk about that and they're like, wow, I get it. I get what being a photographer is. And you're like, yeah. And we're like high fiving, like, isn't this cool? And they're like, this is so freaking cool. You got to leave space for the unexpected, for the mysterious, for something to catch your eye to like, yeah, look at what's interesting, but turn around or be in a building and realize we could probably get on the roof in this building because it's this old building, and and of course that doesn't always work as planned. Sometimes it's a dud, but in photography, you're like, yeah, that, roof access door was locked. Okay, no big deal. We'd like go do something else. So yeah, so kind of cool stories with that one.
It works so in line with what we're talking about today,
Yeah, it
too.
totally
It's
is.
like, it just
Yes.
shows you, I mean, the power and awesome portrait can come out of anywhere. And it really is about the story, the journey, the people
Yes.
involved,
Yes.
all of that.
Yeah, and kind of for me, like integrating into these moments, like, a lot of times people will say, well, do you have a vision before you're photographing something? And I try to often, but it's a little less than like I feel like Ansel Adams or something would talk about vision where he was like he knew the photograph he was going to make. There's more certainty in there. Some photographers have that certainty. I have like ideas, hopes, intention, aspiration, but then most of my best photographs like happen because I'm turning my back to the sunset, or like doing the U-turn, finding the unlocked door, and in the moment responding. And yeah, and that's, I mean, we yesterday we talked about finding the keepers. We looked at someone I'm mentoring their work. Um, Today we're going to look at some of my work and just continue this whole idea on like what makes a photograph great. And I'm sharing my work because at this point, I shared someone else's, but I got to share my own, and that's what I have to work with. We could also share 100 other people's and talk about this as well. So it's not about me and my work. So what we have to do when we're listening, I think this conversation is kind of detach from one guy and his work and just think about a person and work and what makes work interesting and why, and then how does that relate to all of us? How can we extract lessons from this? Because otherwise, we're just like watching a slideshow and we're passive. But as photographers, we have to be creative. So when we watch a movie, we're not just passively watching it. We're looking at the way light. We're looking at composition. we're thinking of all these things, right? And when we look at a photo book, we're not like, wow, that's a cool photo. We're like, ooh, okay. What's the catch light there? What's the story? I can't believe they composed that way.
Mm.
We're not passive. We're not like this. We're not in this for entertainment. We're in this to like gain skills and be creative. So anyway, I think the same thing goes here.
Totally.
And yeah. And so maybe what I should do is share screen
Go
and
for it.
then and we keep jamming on this. And I have kind of a fun idea for it, Derek. I don't know if this will work, but um, what I end up doing was just throwing some images into Lightroom, and I'll go full screen with them. But I can obviously select images. I could go through them sequentially, but I also thought it might be fun either for you or for anyone who's watching if they wanted to pick an image and hear a little bit about why a particular image might be a keeper. And what you will discover in this conversation is sometimes there'll be a keeper because if they're going to meet the basic photographic criteria. Then perhaps there's a personal narrative or story. Then perhaps there's a usage applicability, meaning it's good for the client, it's good for the brand, it's good for a book, it's good for something else. And there are different ways that photographs can be good. And so I'm just kind of trying to broaden that, right? And thinking through like um, how and why. So I have some images. Do you want to pick a first photo? I can kind of scroll. I don't know how well you can see these. I could make them bigger,
Yeah, I can see
smaller.
those good.
Okay, okay. I'm just going to scroll down. I'll go kind of a quick scroll so we can sort of see top to bottom like what we have to work with. Then I'll go back to the top and do a little bit of of a slow thing, kind of row by row. Here's a row, here's a row, here's a row.
Now, while you're doing that, I see Kashif in attendance. Kashif, if you're listening right now, I hope you're paying attention. Would love to hear your input on what you think. I think I know where I'm going to go with.
Yeah,
Now, there's two images that I know, if people aren't familiar with your work, that I know
yeah,
would make for great stories. And
sure,
I'm going to throw out one of the Ben Moon photos, either
sure.
Ben Moon photos, because I think
Yeah,
I know you guys have a great relationship, and there's just
yes,
such a deep story
yes,
there.
yeah,
And our good old gentleman with the eye patch as well, which I know there's a
yeah, yeah,
great
yeah,
story behind that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's go Ben Moon, and I'll just do both of them. Kind of, we'll look at them, and then we'll maybe go to one and then the other. And I just had a great conversation with Ben 2 days ago. He's such a deep, soulful person, and we had this conversation about trauma, anxiety, loneliness, and being a man at this age. We're in the similar age bracket. I'm 51, and how there's there's this idea that we're always not doing enough, just as creators. You look at Instagram, and so it can feel very isolating. And then how there's support you can get from other men. So men supporting men through challenging times was kind of the conversation. Now, of course, this is not at the exclusion of women or like women supporting women. It just happens to be we're both guys and we're both in a similar space. So it was kind of, as men, it's easy to be very isolated and to be with other guys, especially successful photographers, and to feel isolated or feel like you're not enough because you're like, oh my gosh, my friend just did this huge thing, or they have all these followers and I don't, or whatever. So all that leading up to this has just been soulful connection friend. So this is him. Sorry, I have my iPhone. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but I'll just turn that off. But just in his van with his dog, which is so important to him. And we were at an event and he had just pulled up and I asked if I could take a photo of him. And I love this photo because of their connection and their smile. And this one, I think it's valuable to me because I'm often, so it's like photographically, it's good enough, right? Like, I mean, it's not like the most amazing composition in the world, but it checking those boxes. Next, personally, Ben means a lot to me. Cancer survivor, incredible storyteller, just like one of the top humans on planet Earth, I think. And then, of course, with his dog, and his last two dogs have had a big role in his life. And then also, when you have friends, there's always risk that's taken to say, hey, can I capture a photograph? Because no one wants to be photographed. No one like shows up at an event. We were at this thing in Oregon. Is like, yeah, let's like, sure, take my picture. So it reminds me too, turn your back to the sunset, basically like do the hard thing, take the U-turn, find the door to the roof access. So it checks that box. And then maybe lastly, I like to photograph people that have qualities that I want more of: resilience, soulfulness, strength, thoughtfulness. And I think both of them have that. So that's a really good one for me. And that's why it's a keeper for me.
Mm, love that.
Maybe I'll go to the other one. Um, and let me just see here, go out of full screen, back to the grid mode, tap the G key. Um, this other one, same thing. We're also at an event, like a Sony event, and everyone just hanging out. And it's sort of like you're not supposed to be doing photography. You're supposed to be socializing and having free appetizers and drinks and enjoying the music and live music. And it's in what's it called? It's like Red Hook, New York, maybe, or something. Just kind of like cool. Like it was like this cool area. And I always find in those things I feel a little bit sometimes overwhelmed, or sometimes like it's a lot of small talk. So I find if I can have a photographic moment with someone, it sort of like pulls you away from a crowd of people and have a moment of connection. And I like that connection, and that really anchors me. So photographically, I think compositionally, everything, this one's like A plus, like everything works. It's obviously slightly overexposed. I like though the darkness on the cheekbones. And I kind of muting skin tone, so there's some post-production in it. But to me, Ben, I think he must have like Viking blood or something. He looks like a Viking to me, you know. Um, and I like that there isn't a smile. The one before it, he was smiling. This one, he wasn't. Shooting with an 85 G Master 2. So I'm liking that his eyes are sharp, and then like just past his eyes, it's like completely not. And I feel like there's this presence, and there's even some kind of transmission of wisdom in this image. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I can do hard things. I can design my life in a way, because he really does a lot to design his life in a way that aligns. I can live in alignment. And so it's an aspirational photograph for me. And then I think for how it resonates with other people, which we haven't talked about, maybe this is where you get to talk. Um, how or why does this photograph work for you? Because that's part of what we have to do as photographers, right? Is like create something that satisfies, checks some of our boxes photographically, compositionally, creatively, personally, and then out there. And then I should say for him, he like uses this, I think, as his profile photo on Sony, you know. So it's like useful for him as well. So for when that happens, that's really heartwarming to me, because I'm like, this I just did for myself, but then it has life outside of that. And that's a lot of things we're aspiring for when we're searching for keepers. We're not just Photography isn't just for ourselves, it's for the world, for others. So that worked too. All right, your turn. I'll stop sharing so maybe we can see you, if that would make sense, just for a moment. Tell me about this one.
Outside looking in,
Yeah,
I know obviously of you guys' relationship. So number one, that
sure,
stands
sure.
out, where
Yeah,
there's always something special to be captured by somebody who knows you well. So it's like,
yeah, that's
dude,
true.
the day where we finally get to photograph each other,
I know, I know.
it's gonna be like
So true.
nerve-wracking, because I'm gonna be like, what if it's like the day where I'm just
Horrible.
off?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah. But that would
like,
make it funny.
and I'm like, damn, I just didn't. Either
We're like
way,
such good friends, but then our photographs would be like really duds.
like we're just like, wait, what? I don't know what wasn't click.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah.
I kind of feel like I'm cursed in that way, where sometimes it's
Mm,
so the fact that you can do it. I think for me, bringing my own baggage to this, the fact that you can capture him so wonderfully and being
yeah.
so close, like that to me is a gift, because sometimes it's hardest for us to capture those closest to us
Oh,
because
yeah.
we know them so well, and
Yeah.
it's almost like we're too close to the flame that it's hard
Yeah.
for us to step back and really see it as a photographer, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that aspect was interesting to me. Also, the second image you showed, the picture of just Ben without his dog, is
Right.
exactly what I was talking about yesterday,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your style and how you do it so beautifully. And it's like I could take Ben out and put that same style on another portrait, and I'm like, that's Orwig. It's 1000%. If you tell me that's
Yeah.
not Orwig, I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do it so well. And playing off of that, both of those images are so different, and they're still just so beautiful. And I've always really, really, really appreciated photographers who do versatility
Mm,
and cohesion well. It's not completely different styles. It's
yeah.
they're both you, but they're
Yeah.
not the same. I'll throw out the photographer Mark Mann, because he always just
Yeah.
comes to mind as a portrait
Yeah.
photographer that you know a Mark Mann portrait when you see it,
Yeah.
and a lot of Mark Mann's work has that same look, and he's great at what he does. It's
Mm,
recognizable. He's hired
mm,
for that, and for me, yes, that's great, but it's also I really, really, really love when I see photographers work and it's like, wow, I'm going through your website and you have 20 different styles, but it all works together. It's not like 20 different disjointed styles where you're like, well, which
mm,
photographer am I getting on a given day?
Hmm.
For me, it's that cohesion where you captured different sides of Ben. You brought out different emotions
Hmm.
in Ben. So that's why those two images, I wanted to start on those, um, because I feel them from the outside looking in, and to me, they're keepers. And to bring up the point that the last point you brought up is Ben using that as his picture on the Sony website.
Yeah.
That's such a cool flex, especially someone as talented and as accomplished as Ben.
Yeah.
That's the currency now. When people want to print our work, when they want to buy our work, and when they want to use our work to
Yeah.
represent them
Yes.
online, to use as a profile picture, that's a big thing. That's a high compliment
It
to
is.
me. So
It
for
is.
those
Yeah.
reasons, I mean, those are
Okay. That's cool. Yeah.
that's what I'm bringing to the conversation.
Yeah. And thank you, of course. And then I think for us from like a teaching perspective, what I'm trying to do too is like pretend we're not the people who are did this stuff weren't here. Like try kind of remove Chris, remove Derek, or even remove Ben, like and kind of get to like the kernel of what this is. And then also try to find like basically it's like as photographers we want to reverse engineer things a little bit, like and then for me like what connects different moments for me is like connection. Like if I'm not connected with the subject in an image, then it's not a keeper for me. And so I'm connected in different ways, different light, different moments. Boom. Second is meaning for me. I think all of my good photographs have meaning in them. They're very meaningful to me. So if it was just like, let's say there was some, which there was there, beautiful model or something, and I photographed them and it's just like a beautiful picture and it felt like no meaning, no connection in the same light, it wouldn't be a keeper to me. And so again, this isn't about me, but it's about our listeners, about all of us kind of saying, well, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that you really want? So when you're doing stuff in different ways, that shows up. Like with Mark Mann's work, I could be a little bit wrong, but what I'm remembering is there's kind of a grittiness to his work, and there's also an intensity. So I'm going to say most of his images, even of like Obama or Michael Phelps or something, that even though those are different amounts of grittiness and amounts of intensity, they both have those two qualities. And again, I could be wrong because we'd have to look at his work to really evaluate that. But then you're like, oh, that's like that's the story he's telling. Where some people are like, well, yeah, that's because he's using this kind of light. And you're like, no, that's part of it. Like in this case, this is covered shade, light. That and both of those are covered shade. He's in his van, so there's something above him. It's open shade would just be nothing above you. So he's in a shaded area, so the light's soft, it's reflecting in, there's a good catch light. So yes, that's important, but people could use that light in 1,000 different ways. I'm using it, meaning connection. And then there are other things I'm looking for too, like soulfulness. I mean, if I can get more than that, I'm really happy. Sometimes I really like warmth. I think the dog picture has that warmth. And this one doesn't have warmth. This one has a little bit more of strength. And so, I'm kind of layering on different things, hopefully, right? That's what you're trying for. So I think as photographers, if you're thinking of like what makes a keeper, I was just talking about this with someone will remain unnamed, but incredible at lighting. I did a lighting one-on-one tutorial with this person because I really want to go from good to great with studio light stuff. And anyway, he was talking about this idea that a lot of times people, when they share and show their work related to this lighting brand, they're basically showing that they use the light. And so the picture will be like someone by an airplane, and you can tell off camera, they had a softbox and the face is lit. But there's like no story. It's just, the story is like, wow, I figured out this light. And that could be cool. As photographers, we need to be like, wow, I like did this thing. It's almost like, I don't know. We like analogies. It's like I made a batch of cookies. Amazing. You're like, great, you did that. Now cultivate your signature style, like your signature values. What are those things? And again, going back to Mark Mann, I mean, people could probably Google him. Maybe we should do that. But I would say grit and strength or something like that. Or what did I say? Grit and
Intensity.
intensity. Is that true? Would you say with his work?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
His
Okay.
work it's very intense. It's bold.
Bold is another. Yeah. Yeah.
It's I wouldn't say moody. I think whenever we think stark lighting and contrast, I would say
Yeah.
contrasty. Contrasty,
Yeah.
not really moody, but yeah, intense, bold,
Yeah. Yeah.
strong, strong verbs,
Yeah,
strong
because
adjectives.
moody, I would say like just to play with this, if someone's like, "Man, my girlfriend's so moody," yeah, or the weather's so moody, it's kind of like a little bit like there's a little bit of a negative connotation in that. I think his work, even
Hmm.
though it's gritty and strong, there's kind of a positive. It's sort of like a wow, like yeah, like it's not like so anyway, but he's obviously, I would imagine, I don't know him, but we could look at a lot of people's work. He's not thinking like, yeah, I kind of want like warm, sunny, natural vibe, you know. Those are his words. We all need our words, um, so that can get us there. And even back to the very first photo we talked about, where it said, "I like you very much" in the background. I'm smiling in that photo, if I remember correctly. I went up there and I'm just grinning like this is so fun. One, because that's what I tend to like. I do like a little bit of warmth. You could have photographed that in a Mark Mann way, and it could have just been dark and moody and, looking off in the distance and, um, and so that's why we're, I think, having this conversation, finding the keepers, what makes a photograph great. There is no right answer, just like generically for everyone. It's only right for you. And I like to start with craft, composition, all those things. Meaning, is this meaningful to me? And then three, does this also, if we're lucky, mean something to other people? And these are great examples to just talk through those ideas. Maybe we should go back to photos, and we could
Yes.
do some more of this kind of stuff. Hopefully, this is fun um, and
Yeah. Our viewer
and
Kashif said eye patch is what I was looking at. So we got
okay,
two
yeah,
votes for eye patch. And I would love
yeah,
to hear you
iPad,
guys if you guys are out there watching.
yeah,
I want to hear what the audience thinks or what
yeah.
they see or what they feel makes a given image a keeper.
Yeah, yeah, in your own work, not just in someone
Yeah.
else's work, but what is it when you look at work that causes you to pause? I'll come back to this. I'm just kind of going through some images just because we're photographers and it's fun to look at them. What causes you to pause? What draws you in? And obviously, this is just like I kind of grabbed a random selection of images, so it could go a lot of different ways. My mom. Um, this is the same guy. This is Jeff in his garage, and this is Jeff just outside of his house. Um, and I do like, to your point, finding ways to do multiple things with people. Um,
I think that's so impressive
that's
because
Jeff as well, same guy. Yeah,
oh, no way.
yeah.
So
This
three
is
different
this is like the
looks.
Spider-Man shot, um, where like I don't know. This is a hard. It's hard to photograph a photographer with a camera and like the image. Um,
Totally.
it,
It
but this
totally
one,
is.
it's so hard because it's like so kind of, I don't know, cliche, but there's something about this one that I love. Uh, and so it's a keeper for me. All right, let's go back. Um,
And we had a question come
yeah,
in.
yeah,
Actually, maybe we'll pull up the a picture with a hat with a brim on it because the question is related to that. Kevin is asking any tips or suggestions to take care of the shadow that is cast over the eyes when your subject wears a fedora style hat.
yeah. I have couple of those. Let's see if we can pull anything from this. Let me just see if we can get a few of them up there. They have all different crops, but we will live with that. Um, So yeah, so one thing I have found, because I love hats in general, is that most people wear their hats in a way that is lower, that doesn't look very good in photograph. Same way like most people sit in a chair that doesn't look good photograph. You kind of like slouch back into a chair. Um, so often you have to get people a little bit more forward on that. And so same thing with the hat. It's not forward, but in this case it's up. So which and realize the photo on the right, I didn't. It's like wow, she cheated her hat like way up. But I think it still works. It still works for this one. The one here, this is first time I photographed a Native American, which felt so honored to, and on like important land. And again, I'm cheating her hat up a little bit, and then I'm also cheating her face up. This is natural light, So I'm often thinking of that. The guy in this one we can't really see how the light's affecting it, but this one, um, he his hat, it's almost kind of normal. So in this case, maybe I just lowered my light. This was a beauty dish with a B10 and just brought it down a little lower to get it there. But yeah, to the point of that, that's a real thing. And let me just see the other thing that I do in post-production, I feel like almost every time I have someone with a hat, let me see if we can find one with like a problematic. Here's another hat one. Um, that one's just natural light, but here's another hat one. So I really like hats. Okay, this guy might be good. Um, so when I am, oops, ooh, sorry about that. This one isn't great. I mean, this is how you really wear a hat, but I think that for whatever reason this works. But in almost every hat picture in post-production, I'm using a radial gradient, and I get a radial gradient underneath there where that is, and I'm just going to really exaggerate here because I know it's hard to see on Zoom videos, but I'm going to really work with the light in that area. So I'm going to boost my shadows, decrease my contrast, slight increase in exposure. Um, and then I'll use the amount slider to kind of find the right value. And then I'll subtract from that. We just really make this exaggerated. It's hard to, let me just break this. Okay, so here's the adjustment, right? And pretend we only want it underneath. I would use an adjustment brush and I would subtract the area that's hitting his hat above, so I would just have this, not a darkening effect, but I'm making it dark because it's too hard to see that. I wouldn't also have that kind of harsh edge. I would have a soft feather. But if we were to go back to it, we would have maybe, something like this where we're just barely getting a little bit of light in there, and then I would clean up if it's spilling into other areas. But I would say almost everyone with a hat is going to get some kind of radial gradient. I mean, this image, I already did it, so it didn't look that cool in post-production. But if we were to just find a raw file, that is something I do all the time. Here's another hat one. That one doesn't really need it either. But yeah, so that's a great question. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I don't shy away from it. Photographed a subject, I guess now 2 days ago, who I had amazing hair and makeup, like my favorite hair and makeup people I've ever worked with. And the one of them said, "You can't wear your glasses." And so she came over and they said, "I can't wear my glasses." And I was like, "But I love my glasses." And I was like, "Oh no, you're wearing your glasses." And I think they were just trying to prep her because of like worried about reflections, or maybe their previous shoot, someone said had a hard time with glasses. But I'm not going to shy away from hats, from glasses, from scarves, from any of those things because they're such personality components. And I think maybe some people do because of it's like, it's such a bummer. It creates this weird shadow. And I'm just like, well, get them a little lower, tilt them a little up, cheat hat a little bit, and know that you can do that radial gradient thing and just bring that up. And that's a ticket.
Mm, great.
So,
That's great tips.
yeah. Let's see. Should we do another, or maybe a couple more just to see? I could pick one. You could pick one.
Yeah, let's go. I don't think we hit the eye patch one, right?
Oh yeah, the eye patch.
Let's go back
Sorry.
to the
Yeah.
eye patch. Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I remember, there's a good story here.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is Jack O'Neill. He's credited with inventing the wetsuit. I think someone else actually invented it, but he popularized it. And it was back when like surfing was just starting in California. Um, and so anyhow, and his eye patch is made out of neoprene, which is really a wetsuit material. And I asked him, I'm like, "Oh, I noticed it's made out of neoprene." And I'm like, "Why is that?" He's all, "How else would I keep my eye socket warm when I'm surfing?" I was like, I was like, yeah, copy that. Got it. Dumb question. Yeah. And he lost his eye surfing, so it's like, how rad is that? Right. And
That's
so,
cool.
and he's sitting on his porch, which is in Pleasure Point in Santa Cruz. His house hangs over the ocean. So he's literally like sitting above the ocean right here. And the first wave I ever caught as a surfer was right in front of his house. So it's a lot of these different kind of things. And he was old. I was hoping to photograph him standing up, but he couldn't stand very long. So I was like, had him sit down, and he just wasn't obviously really into being photographed. I mean, older people who've done great things aren't necessarily like, yeah, let's do a photo shoot, But to get to be invited into his home and to have that moment, he's since passed. Um, but yeah, so again, compositionally, I think it's pretty good as far as like I was working with what I could. I had him out on his porch. I first started indoors, and you saw like um, a TV in the background, and um, he had sunglasses on top of his head, and it just was like horrible, man. And then I was like, Jack, could we ever go outside? And he was like, well, okay. So it's again, it's like turn your back on the sunset, or find the unlocked door, or do the U-turn. So for me, I'm so glad I did that, because, and then out there just using kind of split lighting, right? So there's a brighter side, a darker side. There's a window behind him and an awning over, or like the overhang of the awning over him. And I just was like, well, I'm just gonna he's right here. I got kind of low, so I'm looking up at him, and he had some looking at me, but there's something about like the eye patch being an important part of the picture. So photographically, I think the lines coming in, the space behind him, his shirt kind of being messy, his hair being messy. I think all of that works. Like this guy's kind of like a pirate or something. But he's a real character. So he's not too, there was no hair and makeup, right? There was no like, let's button your pockets. It was like, I wanted the raw, real salty thing that this guy is in that space. So photographically that works, meaning it works on like tons of levels. And then for his daughter was there, and I gave these photos to the company O'Neill, and they're all love them and useful in lots of ways. So again, it checks a lot of boxes in all that scenario, all those scenarios. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
I knew there was
Oops.
something to that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Just seemed
yeah,
like a
yeah.
character.
Yeah, he's a character. He's a character. And I guess the point with this too is like, I think as people are thinking through if they want to do more portraiture, like the guy that I'm mentoring, I mentioned he's photographing, like in this case, his close friend at this rehab center, he made a great photograph. Now, he could have just gone in there and photographed a stranger at the rehab center, but it might not have been a good, or even worse, he could have photographed a model on the rehab. You know what I mean? So it's like add meaning, make it meaningful. And when it's meaningful, there's just a greater chance that one, you'll fail. So meaning, how you said it's hard to photograph your friends. The more you admire, love, respect someone, the more handsome, the more beautiful, the more important the person, the worse the photography typically. So if you go out to photograph your mom or dad and they're really, really important to you, often your photographic skills go out the window. Or if you photograph, in this case, Jack O'Neill, I was like so nervous, and I was like, this is so important to me. I actually cried after the photo shoot because I felt like I missed it. I didn't get it. Because it was, I just didn't have, sometimes after a shoot, you're like, I got that. And other times you're like, oh my gosh.
Is
Like
it because of who he was? Because I know,
yeah,
like especially like let's look at celebrities, right? You've shot
yeah,
celebrities. You know that they have just a catalog of beautiful images, and especially the bigger the celebrity, the hotter they have been at
yeah,
any point. Like if they were ever
yeah,
at a point where they were like A
right,
list or top
right.
tier, the chances that they've been shot by someone iconic
Yes,
are very high.
very high. Yeah.
So are you comparing yourself to that, or is
Mm,
what makes it so nerve-wracking in that
yeah,
sense of where your picture adds up, and
yeah,
how is that reflected in them? Is it even a
yeah,
thing to them, or is it just you
yeah.
projecting?
Well, I think, and I would say this for my students as well, and I've taught, thousands and thousands of students. So the more beautiful the woman, the worse the photograph. The more famous, the worse. The more, if it's like they're photographing a band and it's their buddies, it'll be pretty good photographs. If it's like a famous band, the photographs are just like horrible. And what I think happens, this is my theory, is that when we're in the presence of greatness, landscape, person, whatever, we kind of think the landscape or the person will do all the work. Like we don't have to do the work. Like, oh my gosh, this is Like, let's say someone, um, well, I mean, you have these old dreams. I'd love to photograph Bono someday, U2, the band that's been important in my life. And so I'd be like, this is Bono. Like, how can I go wrong? Like, anything of Bono is great, but that's not true. You have to do the work of a photographer. So it's that transitional moment where you're like, okay, here I am, but now I need to do the work. And just because they're beautiful, handsome, famous, or something, that doesn't guarantee a good photograph. Or I'd say that with landscape, just because like the landscape's cool doesn't mean you just hold up your camera, you're like, and get a good shot. Usually you're like, oh, that's like a shot of wherever. I've seen that like 1,000 times. But then when someone really works it, you're like, whoa, yes. And so I think we forget that we have to work because we're excited. This is my theory. And we think that the excitement's going to come through the frame because we're feeling excited. But really, in reality, our camera isn't excited. Our camera's like old guy sitting on a bench. Like, what's the big deal? And then I have to be like, okay, let me show you the big deal camera. Kind of have to like, you kind of got to let the camera speak, and then you got to, collaborate with it. Because the camera sees it objectively. Our heart, like my heart, probably when I was doing that was just like boom, boom, boom. I'm like, I can't, I'm kind of like wanting someone to be there with me. And one of the students I'm mentoring said it well. We had music on for one shoot he was doing, and he was like, he said something like, I think I get it. The music's going fast, but the photographer has to move slow. And I was like, ooh, that's like pretty profound. What I mean by that, you don't want to get so caught up in the music. That's good for the person he was photographing. He was doing kind of an upbeat mood, that you make a mistake. And one of the mistakes he made was his shutter speed went too low. And I like look at his work. I'm like, oh, we got to reshoot that. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah. So he had to reshoot this really fun thing. He's like, I'm sorry. Can we do this? You know, and that afterwards, that's when he said that comment that I can't get so lost that my photographic skills are lost in the moment, right? Like we have to, does that make sense? We
Yeah,
have to have
totally.
this like this presence, and also we're in the moment. And yes, maybe if there's music, maybe we're dancing, but we're not dancing so much that we can't make a good photograph. Or maybe our heart's beating so hard, we have to feel that, but we can't let that um, not realize this is a very important moment of Jack O'Neill. I need to just slow down. I need to really, really think, yes, this is so cool. I'm looking at his eye patch through the viewfinder because you can't really look at his eye patch when you talk to him. You know what I mean? You can't be like,
Yeah, you'll
what
feel
is
like
he?
you're just,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you're just kind of like trying not to look at it. So you're kind of like, but then when you have the camera up, you're like, oh, it's like has stitching and it's wetsuit and you know. Oh man.
You got to
So
harness the moment and not be blinded by it. It's like
boom, that's it.
there was
Yeah.
about a decade ago, a really big
Yeah.
thing in New York was climbing bridges. So all the little
Okay.
daredevil photographers and young kids were
Okay.
climbing
Okay.
bridges,
Got it.
and
Got
it
it.
was like
Got
the
it.
thing.
Yeah.
And everybody was so blown away by it. And of course, I
Yeah.
came off like the angry boomer who's just hating on it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the viewpoint, the vantage
Mm,
point is amazing. The
okay.
photography is not amazing. You're literally,
Oh,
it's
got it.
okay. Yes, it might
Got
be
it. Got
badass
it.
that you're climbing up there and you have a completely badass vantage point.
Hmm.
That does not make a badass photo.
Right.
Now, if
Right.
you kind of worked some juxtaposition or played with composition or even just waited for the right and at that point it's like even a sunset. I mean, look, I have a sunset in New York hanging right behind me.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
beautiful, but would I
Yes.
ever put that forward as one? No, it's a beautiful image that I like on my wall because it looks
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
But would I put that forward as one of my best images ever taken? No, because the Empire State Building, the architects of New York City,
Mm,
and good old Mother Nature and the sun setting made the image. I didn't do anything. I stood there
right.
and
Right.
pushed a button. So I think, yes, you bring up such a great point about really putting your mark on it and making the image and harnessing that energy instead of being blinded by the moment to really put your stamp on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just taking notes because this is good stuff. And maybe with this, the notes I'm kind of taking, I won't share, but it's like always learning. Like I'm learning from you as you're reflecting this back and talking about all these different things. And also even the sunset photos, those can be great photos. You know, it's not that you turn your back on the sunset. You don't, it's not that you, or it's not that you don't photograph the guy by the bunk where he lived for 100 days and got sober. You do that and
Yes.
you get roof access,
Yes.
right? And so it's not that you don't photograph your best friends or the beautiful skyline or whatever, the impressive things. You do that and you add more to it, you know, that's the fun of photography. And then what happens, I think, is you're surprised. You know, you surprise yourself, like something. You know, they say like the soul like floats into view. Sometimes they'll say that like the eyes are the windows of the soul. And Steve McCurry has a way of saying it that the soul sometimes it like emerges for like a slight second. And I think there are moments like that. I feel like I've been able to experience and capture. Um, but it's a gift, I guess. Like part of photography is a gift, you know. The things align, something happens, you're there. This is a moment, and you're just like, wow, this is something to behold. And that's one of the things I think. I mean, this is a perfect ending note. When we're talking about keepers, what makes photographs great, it's all the stuff we've been talking about, and maybe the fact that it's a gift that like, you know, and I think a lot of creatives will say this, like, did I really do that? You know, or was that like given to me? You know, I think musicians will say this a lot. Like, was it me writing the song or did the song like come to me from somewhere
Mm.
else? And just allowing some of that magic to be there and to just be like, we're, you know, kind of the stewards of this like magical moment and be like, wow, this is a timeless, beautiful keeper, a moment that's transcends and is special. And I got to participate in it. I didn't like make it, you know.
I
So
love that. That is a great closing thought, and it's kind of cool. It's just sunk into me. I'm like, man, we get to just do what we love and talk about it. Like,
so true.
what a dream. It's
What a
like
dream. It's
photography. It's not even
ridiculous.
like it's not like life or
So
death
good.
stuff. It's not like we're, you know, solving world hunger or we're doctors. It's like we're sitting here talking about photography, which is so cool and really the power of it is so far reaching. So it's
Yeah.
cool to be able to tap into that with you and just talk shop.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's such a gift to have been, I would even say, given this passion, all of us who are listening or watching too, like other people, I think they're like sunset, they're like, wow, that's great or whatever. And maybe they used, you know, grab their pocket phone and whatever, you know, the pocket camera. But for us, it's like we really get to revel in it. We really
Yeah.
get to savor it. We really get to experience life. I think in a deeper, bigger, better, broader way because of photography. Not that there aren't other things that can do that as well, but this is one way that definitely amplifies life. Like I feel more alive because of photography. I feel more connected with people. I feel like I've discovered my flaws through it. I feel like I've gained resilience, you know, all the things. So it is a gift, man. Like our friendship, we
Totally.
wouldn't be friends if it wasn't for this. I think of all the
Yeah.
people I wouldn't be friends with, and I'm like, man, life would be so much more narrow. So, and that's kind of my, I mean, maybe the ending call is just like, keep at it, you guys. This is good, good stuff, and it leads to good things, and you never know what it is. It's worth the time, the effort, the energy, the investments, all the things. It's a craft worth pursuing.
Totally. And coming from two guys who have been at it for decades,
Yeah.
and you guys are seeing, not even the culmination, but like you're seeing us of great ways into the process. So
Yes.
yes, keep pushing. Keep, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not just about the dollars and the cents of it or the branding. It really is about the connection. It's about self exploration, making yourself
Yes.
better. So I think that's perfect note to end on there, Chris. It's always
Yeah.
great
Let's do
chatting
it.
with you,
Woo.
and we'll set up some chats for the future there. I hope all you
Yes.
guys out there are just as inspired as I am every single time I talk with Chris. But it's all we got for now. Another edition of the B&H Event Space, now in the books.
All right.
Catch y'all next
Woohoo.
time.
Yeah.